It is the Everton Byline. We are back for episode 14 of this joyous show that brings you all the wholesome and happy Everton content that you need. I am Matt Jones. I am joined by Paddy Boyland as ever. Fresh, no doubt, from his trip to Southampton. Paddy, how was it? Trains cancelled or anything like that? Or was it all smooth sailing?
I was actually booked on a phantom train on Sunday that actually didn't exist, which, as you can imagine, really helped my mood a day after the game. so a train from Watford to Liverpool that I had a ticket for just disappeared magically. And it meant a nice 6-hour journey back from Southampton. So yeah, great Everton weekend all around.
Phantom train. I suppose it is Halloween, so maybe they just do these kind of things to mess with us. But yeah, that sounds like hell after that performance, which we will of course get into. Just as ever, we'll start off with some housekeeping. We are sponsored this podcast by the Bridewell. If you're watching us on YouTube, you'll have to see their logo in the top right hand corner as you look at it, thanks to Les's wonderful design work he's done for our YouTube show. And as ever, we'd say, if you're out in town, certainly this time of year where the nights are closing in, it's a bit dark, a bit colder, it is a great cozy booze to go and sit in for a few hours. And if you watch us on YouTube, do leave a comment, do hit like, do hit subscribe. And if you're listening to us on iTunes, Spotify, or anywhere else, do leave us a rating, do leave us a review. They help us get through it, certainly. So, well, especially when we have results and performances like we've had over the past fortnight or so. Paddy, let's get into it. I mean, the first one of our topics is, I suppose, it focuses on the game on Saturday in some respects, but we're going to try and sort of look at the broader situation because everybody knows Everton lost to Southampton. Everyone knows about the chances they missed and all that kind of thing. But the fallout from the game has tended to focus around the manager, hasn't it? And his position. I've seen a lot of people, a lot of very level-headed people who follow regarding Everton on social media over the weekend, sort of draw a line under their support for him. I think the moderates, if you could call it as well, who've maybe been either for nor against the manager, have kind of gone in the against column at the weekend or after the weekend. But what we want to talk about really is the situation around Everton and the takeover and the manager, and kind of ask, are the football club just paralysed a little bit at the moment to kind of do anything? Because it does sort of feel as though there's a general acceptance that while it might be time for a change, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I certainly would suggest that it feels like the time has come for a change of leadership in regards to the manager. There's not really much anyone can do about it for the time being, is there?
Yeah, it definitely feels like the club's in limbo. And just to be clear on that, we're awaiting a takeover that is probably in truth about a month away now. Most estimates that we've had, that other people in the media have tended to suggest sometime in December, early December, as kind of a best case scenario. And in this phase, this period, I think it's kind of the hardest to manage. I don't mean manage in Sean Dyche's sense, but I mean in terms of get through as a football club. You're kind of waiting for the big sweeping changes to come, the new ownership, what's going to happen high up the club at boardroom and executive level. And I think when that vision is put in place, everything else below becomes much clearer, but we're not there yet. And actually, until the freaking group are actually in situ as official owners of Everton, there's only so much they can do. So what we're left with right now is obviously a situation where they are preparing the ground to come in. Those conversations between their representatives and people at the club, kind of across various departments, they are very much continuing as the approvals process continues as well. But we've also still got high up the club the same vacuum that's been there for some time. I mean, I often make the point that the owner is want away and has been now for the best part of 2 years, maybe longer, depending on who you believe. There's an interim CEO who was put in situ over a year ago for the MSP transition. And since then, that's collapsed. 777's collapsed. They've been and gone. And we're now in something with the Freaking Group, which itself collapsed for the first time before John Textor came onto the scene. So it's utterly remarkable that Colin Chong probably thought he was going to be in situ for a couple of months at most here. He's not, and I'm not doing him a disservice here. He's not a CEO by trade. If you look back over his history, he's a project manager, really, stadium developer, and very much from a construction background. Now, he's still doing a lot of that because the stadium continues apace. But would all acknowledge CEO is a broader role that needs expertise, and you do kind of feel sorry for these people. Apart from that, you've got Mashiri, you've got a very threadbare board, and then you've got a footballing operation which is largely, almost exclusively run by the director of football, Kevin Thelwell. Now, I've never sensed, still don't sense right now, that much desire for change. That doesn't mean, for example, that's the right answer, but I've not sensed that so far with Dyche when it comes to Dyche's future, to be more precise. And I do believe that the plan ideally would have been for him to see his contract through. Again, that might still be the case. We'll see. But I think we're in this really unhealthy position now, as I wrote in my match piece on Saturday, published on Monday, where we are in that limbo phase. We are waiting for the next thing. But the thing that's suffering is the present. We're all looking to the future. The thing that's suffering is the present. The thing that's really hurting Everton is that even Dyche will look at the situation, I guess, and think to himself, I've not been offered a new deal yet. There's new ownership coming in. If I look at the odds here, they're no better than 50-50 in his favour with regards to staying on. And he will know that. They may actually be weaker than 50-50. And I don't think that's a great position for him to be in. I think it's a great position for the players to be in. And the fans as well. It's a tough sell, as we mentioned last week after the performance of Goodison against Fulham. It's a tough sell for the fans to say, we know you've had to deal with a load of bad stuff over the last few years, but bear with us for another 6 months. Because you get into that topic we discussed last week of kind of wishing the season away. And I've always said, I think I said this on an Athletic pod, that Dyche's football might be respected at times when results are going well. It might be tolerated when results are going well. But as soon as there's a drop-off, there's nothing really for fans to fall back on and cling on to, because there's no sign, as you would get with other managers. Iraola, for example, when he had his teething problems at Bournemouth, that you're building something for the future. It's all on this kind of really pragmatic style. Let's get through games by hook or by crook. If we need to sit behind the ball for 70 minutes against Fulham or more, we will do. And the idea is not to lose that game. But it's not really about building something as such. And I think that's the other problem here. I mean, the results over the last few weeks have been poor. Certainly the game on Saturday was poor. I mean, that's a game Everton should not be losing. Southampton, I think that they're the worst opponents Everton have faced this season, even in Saturday's game, which they won. I thought they were the worst opponents Everton have faced by some distance. And Everton should be beating them. Even on the balance of chances, they should be beating them. When you don't do that, question marks start to come in. And then you start to hear the stuff from the away end, the negativity, and the negativity in the Fulham game as well. So it all feels a little bit precarious, a little bit delicate to me, as though we're waiting for this next thing to come, but we actually just need to get through this first.
Yeah, it does, but like it does feel precarious in one sense, but in another sense, it almost doesn't feel like that at all, because like certainly for the short term, it's not going to change, is it? Because as much as you might say there, the Freakins are having conversations with people at Everton, which would be natural when you're going through a takeover process. They're not going to say to Kevin Thelwell, sack this fella, or go and buy this player in January if he's not done that. Like that as we've spoken about it, we're not going to go into what's going on at Rome at the moment. Maybe we could do that another time. It's it's not going well, but they seem like serious, sensible people, and to try and interfere now is not the remit of serious, sensible owners. And in a way, I'd be kind of glad that they would be just taking a step back and not trying to meddle yet. So everything just kind of feels like it's fixed for the short term. Like don't get me wrong. I think fragile, delicate, whatever synonym you want to use is absolutely right for the medium to long term, because there is so much potential for change there. But for right now, it feels like everything.
The feeling around the club, and I refer more to the way the fans are interacting with the team and with the manager.
Yeah.
We've obviously had substitutions, not only in recent weeks, but going back earlier into the season, that have obviously been questioned, where we've heard a pretty vocal response. I mean, I was obviously at St Mary's on Saturday. Ilman and I get substituted, and you again hear the discontent from the away end. Dyche clarifies afterwards that there's a dead leg there from a pretty poor challenge from Kyle Walker-Peters early on. But at the time, the fans show their discontent. And that's what I mean by that. I don't mean so much that it's with regards to the immediate future for Dyche and everything else, but more just that it wouldn't take much for this to go even further from where it is right now.
Yeah, and that's the double-edged sword, I think, of what we spoke about a couple of weeks ago. Like, I think when we were I think it was after we beat Ipswich, and we were sort of saying, well, we've got all these players out of contract, we've got a manager out of contract, director of football out of contract, and these are the A, B, C, D. This is why it's a good thing. And then you look at it from the flip side, and now you think, well, the situation they're in now is why it could be a bad thing, because you've got a director. Say Ken Fowler had 2 or 3 more years left on his contract. He could potentially, the Freakins come in, and he could be like their main point of reference, and he could say, well, I honestly think this about the manager and think this about these players. But if he's got 1 year left, and they could be thinking, well, maybe we need to replace this fella as well, in the short term. So there's so many moving parts to all this, isn't there? And I think you're right in regards to the style as well. And I think Saturday summed it up so well for me, because I think with Dyche, as long as it's structured and the game's managed and everything cohesive, then they tend to be okay. But on Saturday, I think in the first half in particular, it really shone through for me, where Everton had about 5 or 6 opportunities to counter attack when the game was broken, and they won the ball back high up, or they won it deep, and they had space to run into, and they had to use like improvisation and off the cuff thinking, because the game's not set up how you plan it, because people are in different positions and running in different areas to where they usually go, and you've got to just play off the cuff football and link and be positive and creative. And every time it just broke down. Then if someone took the wrong option, someone played the wrong pass. And the same is true as well, I think, from the defensive point of view. And that is perfectly summed up by their winning goal, where players are out of position, and you need to, we haven't got much pace, have we? Which is an issue, I think, in those situations. And that brings on to our next point about Jarrad Branthwaite. But you've got to think instinctively. You've got to be creative in your defending. You've got to be smart in where you position yourself. And they were all over the place. They were completely at sea. And I think those 2 instances, the poor counter-attacking and not being able to do things instinctively, and the defensive point of view, where it was like, oh my God, we're not in our usual shape. I've not got this player next to me. What on earth do we do? Like that all just rang, well, it was indicative to me of a team that's had that kind of ingenuity, creative thinking, whatever you want to call it, drummed out to them a little bit. And it was just so on show, I think, in that match. Listen, we had 2 or 3 good chances at the end where we could have nicked it. Obviously, we could have scored a goal. But is that really enough against a team like that, who've conceded so many goals, who've picked up 1 point this season? You want Everton to go there and not necessarily dominate the ball, but assert themselves. And there's no real plan of asserting themselves with the initial game plan I think they had. And then in those moments where the game broke down, which I think is what Everton tried to exploit, the fine margins, as the manager will call it, there was nothing in those little moments either to get us over the line. So I think that was an issue. But just very quickly, the last thing on this point, Paddy, have Everton been paralysed effectively by the takeover and the decision making? You wrote in your piece today that it's kind of seeping through a little bit. It's obviously comes from the very top, but it's kind of seeping through a little bit into the team as well. And we've spoken about Dyche's mentality this season in regards to what he said about just getting through to the end of the season, survival is the target, etc., etc. You know, this might be a bit of a harsh phrase to use, but a fish rots from the head, doesn't it? And it does feel as though that kind of mentality, just let's just get by, things going to be all right come the end of the season. It's it's starting to just seep through into different levels of the club as well.
Yeah, I remember after the Chelsea game last season, the 5-0, I think it was in April at Stamford Bridge.
6-0, wasn't it? God.
6-0, yeah, 6-0. I tried to Men in Black blue pill that game from my consciousness and appear to have succeeded, given that I got the scoreline wrong. I think after that game, quite a lot of the stuff that I was hearing was, and I wrote about this at the time, was this idea that there's been so much uncertainty around the club for so long. There have been so many changes of manager, so many relegation battles, that it was just permeating through. It was affecting players, staff. And I think sometimes we underestimate, and that's not to excuse poor performances at all, by the way, because there's a lot more to the performances than just that. But I think sometimes we forget the human impact of some of this stuff, the points deductions, the constant stream of negative stories. I think it has been exhausting at times, particularly for some of those players that have been in this now. Effectively, it's 3 successive relegation battles. Let's see, it may be 4. I think that's one issue that we need to remember. The other is just that I think at the moment, they don't seem particularly well drilled to me, whatever tactical setup they go with. So against Fulham, it is, we're not going to press them high because we're really scared of Adama Traore and Jimenez in behind. It's fine, but you've at least got to be compact if you're doing that. And I still think Everton gave Fulham too much space to dictate in key areas. The plan for the Southampton game was different. I mean, notable early on, the extent to which they were pressing high, all of the midfield going, the strikers going, just leaving this kind of cavern of space between Southampton's penalty box and Everton's penalty box. And that gave Everton some really quite big chances and stuff that will never get picked up on by Match of the Day. There's an Idrissa Gueye botch pass into Dominic Calvert-Lewin early on. There's a Dwight McNeil run through the middle where he's got runners either side and he stalls so long that he ends up getting tackled by a covering defender. These kind of half moments that should be much bigger chances for most Premier League teams, but aren't, because Everton don't handle these situations well. They've never been great in transition. I mean, it's probably only Iliman and Dyer that you would want that to fall to right now, and even he, injured after the Kyle Walker-Peters tackle, was slightly off it in this game.
Felt like a game for him to the first real time before play him centrally, because that's where the amount of times McNeil picked the ball up and that space and just made the wrong decision or just looked a bit sluggish because he's clearly not fit. It was just to not even give that a bit of a go, and then to play Harrison there when he came on, just weird decision making again, isn't it? Which is frustrating.
Well, I actually thought they improved when Harrison came on in the 10, and that's not necessarily just about Harrison. I think it's actually because McNeil went to the left, and there's one key cross for a big chance. Lindstrom crosses, doesn't he, for the Michael Keane header? But Dwight McNeil puts in the cross for Harrison's effort, if I'm not mistaken. And the balance looked better then. McNeil was back in his more natural role. And we've spoken about this issue of balance before. I still don't think it looked right in the middle of the park. What was tending to happen was that Southampton were either coughing up the ball right next to their own goal and Everton weren't capitalising, or they were playing through and having big chances on goal. And that's inevitably what happened right at the end. Obviously, the margins were so fine here. We're talking about Ramsdale getting fingertips on stuff and the ball ricocheting off the post twice, off the bar once, all that kind of stuff we need to acknowledge. But they're not always going to go in your favour. I think at times Everton cede so much control that they're bound to be on the end of results like this. It's just the way that they are under Dyche. He fancies his odds and he'll take his chances, but sometimes it goes against you. And it did on Saturday. On the balance of chances, they shouldn't have lost the game. But the performance was poor. The performance to me didn't feel cohesive. It didn't feel like they all knew exactly what they were doing and they were all implementing it to a T. To me, it seemed like stuff was off. And I think it's compounded by, at one point in the first half, Michael Keane tracks a runner midway into the Southampton half, gets turned, and there's a 3-on-3 from there at the back. And I'm thinking, if you're going to play this way, there's one lad you need in central defence, and that probably takes us quite neatly on to topic
Paddy,
two.
you're such a professional doing this now that you just set up the next segments perfectly, which I've titled on my notes here, "What on earth is going on with Jarrad Branthwaite?" Because I think it has reached that level of inexplicability. That's a word. I mean, you can tell me on that one, but it's I'm just amazed by it. Like, I was reading Michael Ball's column in the Echo today, which has gone out tonight, and he sort of put it. You can obviously say it in different ways to this, but like if Liverpool had Van Dijk out for a couple of games and then Canate and Gomez kept clean sheets for the next two, would you leave Van Dijk out again after that? And listen, I'm not putting Branthwaite up against him, but I think it's probably a similar distance between him and our best centre back as it is with Van Dijk and Liverpool's. It's bizarre, and like I know you spoke about this afterwards in the press conference, and I'm sure you'll be able to give us a bit more detail on that. Sean Dyche, and I was expecting him to sort of say, Branthwaite's coming back from an injury, he's not quite ready yet, all these things, and he just kind of came out and said that Tarkowski and Keane are playing well, so they kept the place. It's mad to me. It's absolutely mad that you've got your best player sat on the bench. I would have played him at centre half. I would have played him at left back even at the weekend because Mikel-Echo's been struggling. If you're really desperate to keep that centre back pairing together, and the evidence is there. Like, just go back to last season. The lad made us such a better player in every aspect, on the ball, recovery pace, helps his left back out. I'm just baffled by it, and I'm like, the manager doesn't want Everton to be worse like that, but it's just a bit of a recurring theme, I think, where we've had this with Yerry Mina, haven't we, in the past, where he preferred Keane to him, and he made the change, and it effectively kept Everton up at the end of his first season in charge. We had it at the start of last season for a bit. He brought Branthwaite in, and it worked to great effect. And here we are again, and it's just weird. I just don't get it. It's the strangest persistence with Michael Keane. Listen, strange persistence, I should probably say, with another centre back that's not Jarrad Branthwaite, because I think James Tarkowski could have been sent off easily at the weekend, because that tackle was absolutely ridiculous in the first half. And he's done a few of them this season, which he's been very lucky to get away with, I think. So I think it's got to be Branthwaite and one other for me now. And the fact that it's not Branthwaite and one other is bizarre, and I just don't get it. I mean, in the press conference, just very firstly, what did he have to say about it? And were you surprised by the way in which Dyche framed it?
Yeah, so like you, my initial thought on this was that they were just trying to be careful over Branthwaite's fitness. He'd come back against Crystal Palace. He'd suffered a slightly different injury, slightly different parts of the body. And while he'd then trained for a couple of weeks, they just wanted to make sure he was exactly right when they put him in to avoid another setback. I don't actually think that is what's going on here. And certainly Dyche isn't suggesting it is. When he was asked about it after the game on Saturday, like you say, he answered that he felt the defence had been performing well, that the Keane-Tarkowski partnership had been performing well. And we obviously know, historically, he's shown an awful lot of loyalty to Michael Keane, I imagine because of their time together at Burnley. He's very recently spoken about Keane recently as a very good defender and an England international, a former England international, someone who's played for his country and clearly holds him in high regard, not only as a player, but as a person, I would suggest, after looking at everything that's gone before. Like you, though, I do wonder how somebody they valued at 70, 80 million pounds in the summer can be on the bench. I mean, I wrote in my match piece on Saturday, again published on Monday. that they're not good enough to have a player of Jarrad Branthwaite's quality. There are very few teams in this league that are good enough to have a player of Jarrad Branthwaite's quality on the bench. And I actually would go as far to say, I don't care who partners him. What I do care about
not. It could be any of the three, but he's got to be one.
Yeah. That's it. I care much more about Branthwaite playing. That's a bigger issue for me than whoever partners him. I think you could make a decent case for Michael Keane right now, by the way, based on recent performances, but it's certainly not a hill I would be dying on. So it's quite odd to me.
It's interesting, isn't it? So it's interesting because we talk about his loyalty to Keane, but the thing with Tarkowski is that loyalty has never really been tested because he's not been suspended, has he, when he's been Everton? He's never been injured. So he's just played and been like fine in his first 2 seasons, and there's been no reason for him to be taken out the side. Whereas now it's probably the first time you look at him. He had a couple of knocks, didn't he, in pre-season? Yeah. And he's obviously come back and he's not playing well. Like I think he could have been sent off, a few times this season, really. Like the Mateta tackle against Palace, I think we said it was just about okay, but could have easily been a red card. That at the weekend, it could have been a red card. He's given away a daft penalty against Newcastle for a brain dead moment. But like that Dyche to have to drop him and bring him back into the team has never been tested. So we're talking about how much he's loyal to Michael Keane and how much he's got to have Keane in the side. Maybe it's more about Tarkowski as well at this point, where he's even more loyal to him, but it's just never been tested before because he's played so many games without being injured or suspended. But I just find it so strange that you've got this player, and I imagine Branthwaite maybe after his first game back where he's on the bench last week against Fulham, kind of maybe would have got it, but I would be annoyed if I was him at the weekend to be sat on the bench. And like you said, we've got this player here who's worth a lot of money. Ideally, you'd say he would be the future of the football club, and you're not playing him after sweeping the board of awards last year. Narrowly missing out on the European squad for England. It's just baffling, and I think
he's the best player, isn't he? He's Everton's best player. Put simply, we're probably with Illiman and I, but I'd rank Branthwaite higher based on what he's done over the past season or so. He's probably the biggest difference maker in the squad as well, in terms of what he's done since he's been in the team after coming in after that winless run at the start of last season. But if I asked you a question, Matt, and this comes secondary, by the way, to results right now, but is Jarrad Branthwaite worth more or even the same as Everton's valuation over the summer right now, based on the decision making? I'd argue that the combination of injuries and not playing him have harmed his value as an asset to Everton. And we can't only look at it in those terms, but it's a part of it. It has to be a part of it because we still have PSR, we still have financial concerns, everything else. His values must have gone down by now. You're not managing the asset correctly, are you?
No, it's very strange, like how it's gone, and like I think Dyche in the past he's been stubborn with these players. Like, well, it's been stubborn with Keane twice in the past, and there's been calls to bring in me, and there's been calls to bring in Branthwaite, and both times it's kind of worked out as those who've called for it would say. But I don't know. I just wonder and worry that with him being in his last year, with the pressure mounting up, he might just sort of dig himself even further down into these trenches when it comes to Keane and Tarkowski. But like I said, I would play him left back. I mean, Mikalenko was dreadful for the goal at the weekend and has not looked himself for a while now.
I wouldn't play him left back. I wouldn't play him left back. I think he's Everton's best central defender, and I think
I totally agree. But I mean, if he's going to stick, if he's like ironclad stuck on those two being the centre arse because he thinks they're playing incredibly well, you find a place for Branthwaite, I think, and you get him in at left back, which is not what I'll do. But I totally agree with you. But I mean, it's just a bit bizarre. So yeah, it's a very strange situation that hopefully gets resolved this weekend. Because I think it was actually West Ham away last year where Branthwaite played, and it kind of struck me like, wow, we've got something very, very special here when he just sort of had Antonio off all day and set up Calvert-Lewin's goal.
Yeah, but what we're doing now is we're keeping him on the bench for a period of time, and he's going to be short of match fitness when he comes in, because all he's getting is a handful of minutes here or there as a substitute, so Michael Keane can go up front. And it sounds like somebody had told me this at the start of the season, it would have just completely blown my mind.
Wild.
All of it, to be honest. I think Dyche is very set in his ways, and I'm very stubborn, and that's not always a negative, by the way. He's got the courage of his convictions over some stuff, and sometimes it worked out. I think the more people that tell him, you're wrong on this, you need Branthwaite right back in the team, whoever it's for, and Ndiaye is number 10, almost the less likely it is that it happens in a perverse sense, because he does back his ability and he does think he knows best. So we'll see. Let's hope this was enough of a hiccup, enough of a false step as a result against the worst team in the league, for him to have a bit of a think, a bit of a rethink. If that's what comes out of this, that he looks at things and goes, we're going to have to tweak this, then yeah, it's a very disappointing result, but at least then we can take something from it into the games to come, because it's still, we keep referencing that December. It's still a really key run. West Ham away, really not playing well. Lopetegui fighting for his life as manager. Into Brentford at home, winnable game on paper. Into Man United away, harder now because Ruben Amorim will be there, I think, for his first game at Old Trafford.
Yeah.
So harder now. They should go into that with a head of steam and fresh momentum. And then it's Wolves at home, another massive game. So this 4-game block, it's got to be right.
Yeah, I think that international break looms, doesn't it? Looms large if we lose the weekend. But maybe not, because we can't, as we said, stop. Who's going to do anything? But maybe it doesn't loom, just drag and drag. But yeah, very bizarre goings on with the centre backs at the moment. And I imagine if Branthwaite's not in the 11 at the weekend, then yeah, I would be very annoyed about him, to say the least. Let's try and finish off on something positive, Paddy, because we've been doom and gloom, haven't we, today? Your journey back from Southampton, the team's performance there, all massive low points. But things are going all right in the academy, aren't they, this season? I think towards the end of last season, and certainly midway through it, it felt like every time you checked how the under-21s were getting on, how the under-18s were getting on, it was not well. Obviously, the club have had to sell a lot of the young players to try and meet PSR, people like Sims and Cannon, who were kind of on the fringes of the first team, and obviously Samuel Smith as well. Because it's great on the balance sheet, isn't it, to make sure you meet those thresholds. So they've had to be moved on. A lot of players out on loan, but it didn't feel like there were any real prospects coming through to get excited about. This season, I mean, this is completely different. The under-21s and under-18s got good wins at the weekend. There's loads of goals. There's comebacks from 2 down. There's comebacks from 4 goals down to get a draw. Leighton Baines under-18s. So it does feel as though the academy and the youth system is certainly in much better shape than it was last year, where it felt like there's no chance of any of these coming through. But things are starting to fall into place a little bit at that level now. We're at under-18 and 21 level.
Yeah, and I think we can take this a little bit higher still as well and broaden it out. I mean, it's been a good 6 months or so for the academy, in the sense that Harrison Armstrong's made his first team debut as a 17-year-old. Roman Dixon's had minutes and done okay. I thought he was one of Everton's better players at Tottenham Hotspur. And certainly there's a feeling that Armstrong has a chance. Armstrong in particular has a chance moving forward. Still raw, still 17, still might need another development step. But there are a lot of positive thoughts about what he is and what he could become. Obviously in England, under-18 international now. So really progressing well from that point of view. But below that, it's interesting. I mean, you look at the results week on week, and it's 4-3 here, as you say, 5-2 there, 3-1 here. And certainly the under-21s and under-18s this season haven't shown much sign of being able to defend. They leak a lot of goals at both levels. But one of the things I found fascinating, Matt, is that a lot of the names doing the rounds, when you look at the score sheets, when you see who's doing well, are players that have been brought in over the last 6 to 12 months into the club from other clubs. So you've got Omari Benjamin, released by Arsenal, signed by Everton over the summer. Pacey, Welsh youth international, can play across the forward line. He's already banging them in at under 21 level and doing really well. Playing a lot at the moment as a centre forward, but I think that's because of injuries. I actually think he's slightly better from the left as a right footer coming inside. Can play from either side. And then lower down, there's a bit of excitement about the cohort of strikers they've got there with, in the under-18s, Braden Graham, Northern Irish lad signed from Linfield over the summer. He's going at a goal a game at the moment, doing really well. Justin Clark signed, I think in September, late September, from Wimbledon. 15, he might be 16 now, but signed as a 15-year-old. He's scoring, I think he's 5 in 4 or 6 in 5 since joining from Wimbledon at under 18 level. And there's a few other interesting players within the ranks. Joel Catesby, a lad from the Wirral, pacey winger, another player to keep an eye on. When you put it all together, it starts to look a little bit more optimistic than it was, even when Dyche was talking after I think it was before the Chelsea game actually, about last season, about the lack of options, the lack of immediate options for the first team. And it was, to be fair to him, he was right at the time. There wasn't anybody at that stage that was going to step in and plug a gap straight away. But it looks healthier now 6 months on, and it looks healthier lower down. Now, that's probably going to take a little bit of time. I still think there's a lot of investment that's going to need to go into that academy based on the money other clubs are spending, the players they're recruiting, and so on. But it's just that injection of quality through recruitment over the summer and last January is really starting to help them. And check out, I think that the club put out the goals from both those games on the academy Twitter page. Lovely free kick in there from Braden Graham, and he's one. When I've seen him so far, been really, really impressed with him as a goal scorer and just as a footballer. He's only small, little ginger lad. Looks like he should be in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, really. But a live wire, rapid, getting behind, getting to really good positions, goals, and being from near to Belfast has a bit of bite about him as well. So a better place, and like you say, something nicer to focus on after a difficult week or so for the first team.
Yeah, and pleased for Leighton Baines as well, because obviously he's the under-18s manager now, isn't he? And he's, things weren't going great initially by the looks of it, but he seems to be settling in and really starting to hone his craft there. And listen, you don't want your academy teams winning 1-0, do you? You want them winning 3-2 and 5-4 and whatever. You want to see them just scoring loads of goals as the priority. Sort the defense out when they get a bit older. But if you can score goals, that's really exciting.
Yeah, I also think as well that while we all want to see Everton teams win and develop winning habits, that is important. That comes secondary, most coaches will tell you, to the development side of this and sending players on loan and them experiencing different positions on the pitch, different systems, all that kind of stuff. A shout out for Leighton Baines. I felt a little bit sorry for him last season. I mean, that was not a strong under-18 cohort. It was on the weaker end of the spectrum, even going back over the last 5-10 years of Everton teams at that level. And that's why you look at the recruitment this season across those levels, and you've seen players brought in because they've needed to supplement. And there also have been, we speak about Harrison Armstrong, we speak about Roman Dixon. Further down, they've got a couple of really good goalkeepers at under 18 and under 21 level. Further back, in Doug Lukanchik's, I'm going to absolutely butcher his surname.
Luke Shanks, 17 years old.
Even if you find the name, you're going to have to try and get through the Latvian surname and try and work out how that.
He's England youth international, isn't he?
He is England under 17, 18. Very highly regarded. George Pickford, no relation to Jordan, before anyone asks. Also highly regarded in the 21 setup. Both of them have been called up by England recently, and both held in very high regard. So there is stuff coming through. There probably needs to be more, and that still needs to be invested in general, the academy. It does feel a little bit rosier, which is a positive.
Yeah, not going well for the men's senior teams, not going well for the women's senior team, which maybe something we'll talk about at some point. So you want goals and entertainment, go and watch the academy. By the looks of it, seems to be the way of it at the moment. But yeah, we have got the women's Merseyside derby Goodison next week, so maybe that's something we'll touch upon next Monday, Paddy, because yeah, things are not going well for them. You were beaten 5-0 by Chelsea last night at a pretty empty Goodison. So one for another time, perhaps. But yeah, we will wrap it up there. Like I always say, just a reminder, we are sponsored by the Bridewell. Get yourself down for a drink over the weekend, before or after the Blues play against West Ham, celebrating or commiserating. And yeah, leave us a comment. Let us know your thoughts on anything we've spoken about today, about Dyche's situation, about the takeover, potentially stalling things on that point of view. Give us your wildest Jarrad Branthwaite theories. What on earth is going on there? Because it's quite ridiculous. And let us know what you think about the academy and any players that maybe have caught your eye over the last few weeks. Like, subscribe, leave us a rating, leave us a review. Me and Paddy will be back on Monday to reflect on the game against West Ham, to reflect on that women's Merseyside derby, any other big stories that break over the week. Cheers for tuning in. Up the toffees, and we'll catch you soon.